G'day guys! This coming week I'm going to be attending the World Team Championships to represent Australia. We're going to be attending the War Masters singles event first, where I'm going to be playing the World Eaters, going for that Best in Faction trophy. And then I'm going to be operating in a coaching capacity for Team Australia to help our 8 best players win that global championship. So in today's video, I basically want to break down the list that I'm taking to the War Masters single event, talk a little bit about my expectations, and then talk a little bit about my role as coach for Team Australia, what that involves, and some of the exciting things that we have planned for this event. So with that being said, let's get stuck straight into the video.
One for the Blood God.
Alrighty, let's talk first about the War Masters singles event. Now, this is just like your traditional, ITC style singles one-on-one tournament with 6 rounds. And the different thing that they're doing at this event is they're awarding a trophy for Best in Faction, or a medal for Best in Faction. So basically they break everybody down into their factions. You still play your normal games against your normal randomized opponents. However, whichever player from within each faction scores the highest or places the highest is going to be rewarded for that. So with that in mind, I decided to take my pet project, my World Eaters, my favorite faction of all time, and go for the Best in Faction there. I did this knowing that the World Eaters currently are one of the least popular factions in competitive Warhammer 40k. They are really struggling to score those wins. I think they're on something like a 35 to 40% win rate globally, which is disastrous. But I knew that this would mean that there would be fewer players at the event playing World Eaters, which would increase the chances of me taking home that Best in Faction. And it also just locks in that it's going to be a lot of fun to play, because I'm not going for that try to win 6 consecutive games, which can be quite intense and quite stressful. I was like, nah, I'm just going to play this. As long as I win a couple of games, then I know I've done well, and sort of make the best I can out of the situation that the World Eaters are currently in. So I'm not looking to win the event by any stretch. My main goal is that Best in Faction award. So the list itself has Angron, because I think he's a must-have in World Eaters lists. If you're playing World Eaters, you might as well be playing him. He's not particularly good, but as far as World Eaters units goes, he's quite well. And he has, the main thing about him is he has an aura, a 6-inch aura of reroll hits, which really does dial up the damage output of all of the other units that you're going to be playing with. So Angron's really, really exciting. He can also, of course, be resurrected. He can advance and charge, so he's got the massive threat range, and he is a real heavy hitter when it comes to versing other mech. So knights, things like that. I'm going to be sending in Angron. He's going to be just absolutely doing massive damage. So that's the first part of the list. The other 2 characters that I've brought are 2 Masters of Executions. Now, I dubbed these guys Magic Mo and Murder Mo. Now, Magic Mo, he's just a Master of Executions with the Favored of Khorne, and he just operates on his own. He doesn't have a bodyguard, and he's just going to go into strategic reserves, come down on turn 3, probably do one of my secondary actions or something like that. Maybe make a 9-inch charge, maybe kill something, but his main purpose is for the Favored of Khorne relic, which allows me to reroll my Blessings of Khorne dice. Now, this is critical if you have Angron on the list, because it increases your chances of resurrecting him significantly. But it's also critical just for general World Eaters list, because it increases the chances of you getting the really important things like advance and charge. And without that, the World Eaters really do struggle to make it into combat. So that's my Magic Mo. The next is Murder Mo. Now this guy, I actually think he's one of the most powerful characters in the game. He's absolutely bonkers, this lad. He comes with a 10-man strong Berserker bodyguard, and they're mainly just there to facilitate him. Their whole purpose for existing is to make it so that he gets to do what he wants. They absorb Overwatch if somebody's trying to stop him from getting into combat. Then if he makes combat kill something, they're there so that they can absorb shooting, give him the Blood Surge move, allow him to get into further combats. They're basically just a tech piece, a 230 point upgrade for this character that's going to allow him to get into combat more easily. Now, he has the Berserker's Glaive relic. Now, what this does for World Eaters is it gives him plus D3 to his attacks and, importantly, his damage characteristic, which means this guy can have a 5 damage weapon that has devastating wounds, which is really, really scary, especially when he charges something that has a character in it or is a character, because he's going to get reroll hits and reroll wounds, which means this Master of Executions can go in with up to 9 attacks, rerolling all of his hits, so getting 9 hits most likely. Then he's going to roll those 9 dice again, rerolling anything that's not a 6. So he's probably going to roll 1.5 to 2 6s in there. Then he's going to reroll the rest and probably roll another 1.5 to 2. So you're looking at between 3 and 4 6s here. And if you rolled that D3, that's 5 damage, which means that's between 3 and 4 devastating wounds, which is between 15 and 20 mortal wounds dealt to the target. And then, of course, you've got his other damage and the damage from the Berserkers as well. There's almost nothing that this guy can't kill when he charges into combat. In my practice games, I killed Drago and a unit of 10 Paladins with him. I killed Trajan and 5 Custodian Guard with him. I killed a Terminator Sorcerer and a unit of Scarab Occult, then Magnus with this one guy. He's the absolute powerhouse in the list. He's crazy. Then we get into the meat and bones of the list. So we've already talked about the Berserkers. We've got a unit of 10 Jackals. They're just there to sticky those backfield objectives and probably die, but make sure that we're still scoring those primary points for holding that backfield objective. Then you've got 2 Mauler Fiends. Now these are an interesting tech choice. They do pretty well. They're very fast. They can advance and charge. They can auto-advance 6 with that strat from the World Eaters. And they sort of operate as Angron's bodyguard. They go up and they flank Angron, and then basically they go in and do heavy damage. I've given them the Lasher Tendrils, so they have those additional attacks just to make sure that they don't get tar-pitted by, a horde of Gaunts or something like that, or, neophytes in the Genestealer Cult matchup, or Necrons, those sorts of things. Make sure they've just got 12 attacks, 13 on the charge, high strength, high damage. They're going to be killing things really effectively. And then the other interesting thing, we've got a Rhino. The purpose of the Rhino, of course, is for Master of Executions, Murder Mo, and the Berserkers. They sit inside that, and I deploy them out of line of sight, so there's not really any way that my opponent is going to be able to effectively deal with them early, and that allows Murder Mo and his boys to disembark out massive distances, because they can disembark out 3, then they can move 6, so a total of 9. Then if you use the Blessings of Khorne, you can get an additional 2 to that, so now they're moving out 13, then they're charging auto advance 6, you really can just launch these guys out. They move out, it's 11 plus an auto 6 and then a charge. So really, really fast. And that means that there's not really anywhere that your opponent can hide. If you have that central Rhino out of line of sight, you'll be able to threaten all of the midfield objectives with it pretty effectively. And it's a really good way of unlocking his power. And then last but not least, we have 3 Chaos Knight Brigands. Now these guys, they sound a bit weird in a World Eaters list because they're a Daka unit. They actually have almost no melee, but they unlock a few very interesting things for this World Eaters list. One of them is that they give me the ability to pop transports with those melter guns so that I can charge the contents. One of the biggest challenges with melee-focused armies is that if you can't pop the transport, you can't engage with the troops inside, and then in your opponent's turn, they're just going to disembark and kill you. So being able to pop transports is really critical. Being able to pick up stragglers without having to go all the way over to them and deal with them is also really important. If there's a couple of small bodies of, maybe there's a couple Marines left in that unit and then they run away, being able to just go, cool, you're trying to run away, eat Gatling cannon, and they just shoot them down. That's really effective. And they also have a very high movement characteristic and very high objective control, which is a really critical part of the list because one of the other challenges that combat armies face is that your opponent can dictate where your models go. They can put that unit that's doing heavy damage out in the open, not on any objectives. And then in order to kill it, you need to go out into the open off of the objectives, which means it's really hard for you to score your primary and really hard for you to maintain that objective dominance when your opponent is dictating where your units have to be. So that's one of the downsides of combat. So bringing in a couple of units that can hop on a backfield objective, hold that objective, and still provide firepower into the fight is really, really important. So World Eaters players, I highly recommend the Brigands. They've been one of the MVPs in most of the games that I've played because people are too busy dealing with the Mauler Fiends and Angron and the Berserkers in their face. they don't have the disposable damage to deal with those brigands. So that's my list. So like I said at the start, I'm not looking to go 6 games of victory. I'm going up against a lot of Eldar, a lot of Gene Stealer Cult, a lot of Custodes, and these are all really, really hard matchups for the World Eaters. So I'm pretty confident that I'm going to lose a lot of games this coming week, but it's going to be a ton of fun, and hopefully I can get a couple of wins in there and use that to go for that Best in Faction World Eaters award. Now let's talk a little bit about the coaching role for Team Australia. So basically, after the War Masters singles event, I'm going to be jumping over to Team Australia and I'm going to be helping them out with their teams tournament. So for those of you who haven't seen teams tournaments before, I highly recommend you look into them. They're some of the most fun 40k you'll ever play in your life. They're really, really cool. Basically, you get a team of 8 players. This is what World Team Championships is. You get a team of 8 players. Each player must take a different faction, so you can't just have a team of 8 Eldar players, for example. Each player takes a different faction, and then our 8 players get paired into the 8 players from the other team or the other nation, and then they get paired off one by one with an interesting little pairings matrix, which is a really fun way of identifying or determining who plays against who. And then they go off and they play, and then the aggregate scores from all of those games gets put together to determine which team won. So this is really cool because what it means is that as part of the team, if you lose a game, it actually doesn't feel that bad because as long as the rest of the players in your team win, you're going to win because your team has won, which means sometimes taking that bad matchup is something that needs to happen in order for the team to win. And it also means that when you win, you feel even better because not only have you won, but you've contributed to and helped 7 other players win as well. So team events are absolutely fantastic in that regard. They force diversity in the meta because you can't just take the same list over and over and over. So they force diversity, they force a lot of different types of armies to play. Then they also grant players the agency over who they play through the pairings process. So you can avoid the really bad matchups or you can, jump on that grenade for your team. So there's a lot of fun that can be had there and it allows you to run really interesting lists. And then on top of that, it makes your victories sweeter and it makes your losses less bitter. So I fucking love Team 40k. It's the best way to play 40k hands down. Now, what we're doing this year is we're bringing a bunch of coaches. We've done it before. Australia actually won the World Team Championships last year, so we're going back in to defend our title. And what we're doing is we're bringing all these coaches, and basically we're there to facilitate anything that the team need to make sure that their games run as smooth as possible, as easy as possible. And basically, there's a whole bunch of different tasks involved. So one of them is we've got say you've got a Tyranid player with 200 models. We're there so that when his units die, we can sort them back out into their units so that he doesn't have to stress about that. He can just go, cool, these models are dead, and he can just chuck them off, and we'll sort it all out for him so that when he goes into his next game, it's all sorted, it's nice and easy. He can just focus on making decisions in the game. That's one example. Other examples are walking around and updating players on their scores. So basically we can go around and figure out who's winning their games, who's losing their games, and then we can basically provide that information back to the team so they know that if, say we've got 8 players, say 5 of them are going to lose their games and then 3 of them are going to win. When we know that, we can then tell those 5 players, all we need is for one of you to turn that loss into a win. So we can talk to those people and maybe they need to make some riskier plays. They need to go for those big multi-charges, or they need to split their fire because if they do spike high and they do manage to win that game, then the team's going to win. Whereas if we keep going on the current trajectory and those 5 players all lose, then as a team, we're going to lose. So we're basically a relay point for information between the players. We're there to assist the players with those things. We're also there to help with looking up rules, getting judges if there's any challenges, overseeing the game, making sure that nobody's cheating, making sure that nobody's breaking any rules, watching the table while our player goes to the bathroom or getting them drinks or things like that so that they can just purely focus on achieving those results on the tabletop. So that's the capacity that I'm going to be functioning in for the teams event, just helping out the team and making sure that they win. Obviously, also as a coach, I've played a very heavy hand in some of the list creation, practice games, and all the other preparation work that we've done in advance, and we've been working on that over the last couple of weeks. So that's another really key and critical element of the coach role, is making sure that the team is at peak performance before we fly over. And And yeah, I'm really, really excited. And then part of my trip, because we're going to Europe for this, we're flying across to Belgium first for this. So singles events in Belgium, team events in Belgium. And then from there, I'm going to be traveling on through the UK. I'm going to be going to Warhammer World, and I'm going to be doing a bunch of video podcasting and stuff like that from there. And then having a little bit of a European holiday in their summer. So that's essentially what I've got planned over the next, couple weeks. I'll obviously be updating you guys as often as I can and providing as much content as I can from the event. So I'm looking at maybe interviewing my players after I verse them in the singles event, doing some live stuff during the teams event, updating everybody on the scores, updating on everybody on where we're at, and then maybe looking at some interviews with some players, maybe interviews with the referees, that sort of thing. And then obviously heading over to Warhammer World, I'm going to be trying to do as much content over there as possible as well, because this is a lifetime experience that a lot of people don't have access to. I'm very well aware of how blessed and lucky I am to be included in Team Australia and being able to afford to do this trip over to Belgium and to the UK. So I want to basically make sure that I'm sharing that experience with you, so that for those of you who've never been to Warhammer World, I've been into Warhammer for nearly 20 years now and I've never been, so I'm sure there's plenty of other people out there that would love to know what it's all about there. So I try to include you all in that, and also include you all in on the World Team Championship experience. So basically going to be hitting you guys with as much content as I can, but as always, I will be focusing on the games and trying to be respectful to my opponent. I don't want to, pull out my phone every 5 seconds to record something. I want to be engaged with them. So it'll be a bit of a fine line, a bit of a balance to work out, but I hope you're keen to enjoy this experience with me. So with that being said, let me know in the comments below if there's anything in particular that you would like to see from the World Team Championships. Is there any particular people or players you'd like to see interviews with? That might be something I can try to organize. Is there any particular aspects of the World Team Championships that you're curious about that I could perhaps shed some light on? Is there anything about Warhammer World and just, England in general that you'd like to see? Is there any content creators you'd like to see me try to reach out to and maybe do some kind of collaborations with whilst I'm over there? Because obviously Australians don't go to Europe all that often because we're a very, very long way away. So if there's anything you'd like to see in that sort of space, let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you think of my World Eaters list. This will probably be some of the last World Eaters content that I will do until they get a codex. I'll probably pivot over into the Chaos Space Marine stuff very soon, because there's a lot of ground to cover there, and there's some very strong lists. I haven't been doing content on that at the moment because I didn't want to reveal any of Team Australia's secrets, but we've come up with some really, really interesting tech, some really interesting strategies, and some really interesting tricks that you can do with the Chaos Space Marine. So I'm looking at doing some of that content in the coming weeks as well. But yeah, let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the next one. And next time you hear from me, I'll probably be in Europe at the World Team Championships. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Cheers.
Look for the Blood God.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment, he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel